Welcome everyone to this special episode of our podcast. My name is Amit Choudhary and I'm the current representative of the DARE project. Today we'll be reflecting on the DARE project at Wageningen University and research as it comes to a close. Over the past 3 years, the DARE team has been instrumental in addressing racism and discrimination within our institution. Joining me today is Rector Magnificus Arthur Mol, who has been a key figure in supporting this project from the start. Arthur, thank you for joining us.
Oh yeah, it's great to be here, Amit. Good to see you also again.
Yeah, it's always nice to see you. And just before we dive in, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on our journey together. So I first stepped onto this campus as a student back in 2015. So around the same time, I guess you became rector, maybe a year before.
Exactly the same year.
Exactly the same year, yeah. And here we are as a DARE project ends and you transition from your role. It's an honor to host you on this podcast.
Okay, it's great to be here. Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, so let's get started with DARE itself, because there are a lot of people I've talked to in my role as a representative in the last year who had a little bit of idea into what DARE is, but not a lot about what DARE has achieved and about the pillars that we have. I have a question for you directly, Arthur. Let's start by discussing the inception of the DARE project and its goals. Can you provide some context on why addressing racism and discrimination at Wageningen University and research was deemed significant?
So I think the most important thing I want to mention on the DARE project is that it started bottom up. So it was not an initiative from the executive board. It was not even thought about by the executive board. But it came really from the students and a little bit also from some staff members who became worried on discrimination, racism, and especially, so maybe less the very visible and very knowledgeable one, but especially the less visible ones, the more institutional ways of discrimination and racism. And it was really, I have to say, through the students that we started the discussion on the need of a group of people who take that further along the institution, and especially to raise awareness, to start projects on that, and really to build, to make our institution less discriminatory, more aware that there is also less visible racism here. And along the way also the colonial aspects came in. And I think I really appreciated that. And that made me, as an executive board member, as a rector, especially very much enthusiastic about that. Because a lot of times, of course, what happens is that an executive board has an idea and they think it should happen. And then they start a working group and they should do that. And that sometimes works, but we know, especially if it's come from below, as we say it, bottom up, it's really in the motivation and the enthusiasm of in this case, especially students, it really has a much bigger chance to really work. So that's, I think, also the starting point. Mm-hmm. And I really also liked very much the initial discussions where I also went, I think, myself through a period of recognizing that, of course, it basically you start, and I think typically for a white male 60 plus person is saying that, there might be small things, but basically our institution has no discrimination. We treat everyone fairly. There's certainly no racism here. We have left the colonial past far behind us, etc. So I think through the work of the DARE group and through the various discussions we had, and also the two of us, but also other members of the DARE team, that made me aware, there is more to say there. And of course, there were a few episodes also. You have to stop me if I talk too much, Amit.
Sure, yeah.
So there were also a few episodes, I think, in the history, the short history, the recent history of our university, where it became very pregnant. So I remember very much the discussions which was there on the photos, which were outside being put on campus.
About Africa.
Africa, scavengers in Africa, where I also thought initially, okay, these are very nice pictures and they show also the interest of Wageningen as an institution, but also its staff and students in this problem. So, and I think through indeed the discussions where DARE was also very active, I think I came to know that there is another layer there. And not to say that the pictures were completely wrong, but I think noticing that you can look at the same kind of happenings, activities, objects, pictures from different perspectives. I think that was very important in that.
Yeah, diving deep into the history. I once heard from a historian friend of mine that never forget your history, because that will always come back in some way or the other. Doesn't matter if you want it or not, because everything is rooted in it. And there are, of course, different ways of looking at it. But I appreciate the fact that back in the day I was... DARE started through the Black Lives Matter movement. That was what happened to George Floyd was really unfortunate, and it was like caused a lot of anger, and it spread over to different continents outside of North America. And this led to people, like a group of people coming together and forming the Anti-Racist Association of Wageningen, and then getting into talks with the university staff, the top management. And I'm happy that you recognize the efforts, and also I also feel there's also a sense of self-learning like along the process, on both sides, but especially on people who are more privileged than others in different ways.
Yeah. No, and I think also it's good that you mentioned that indeed the George Floyd case, because I remember quite vividly still that there was, of course, widespread, also I think among our community, widespread, well, maybe even anger, but certainly condemnation of this event, of course. And basically from the position, this could never happen at Wageningen University and research, of course. And I think it won't happen in that exaggerate case. But of course, it stands for much more. It was an exaggeration and I think that is the strong point of DARE, of maybe subfluent developments, which we also should have to take a look at. And partly that's indeed rooted in history. Partly it's also your privileged position, I think. Partly it's also, although in Wageningen we are very international oriented, we are still coming from a very particular culture. And although I think also we do our best in of course, learning in an international classroom, bringing cultures together, so our students go abroad and spend time in different culture, that is still something different than really understanding and also feeling what people from a different color, a different ethnic background might come across when they are in the Dutch society. Yeah, I'm really excited for the conversation later on, because I'm really happy with how honest you are right at the beginning. And so moving on to the next segment. Let's discuss in this segment some hot topics, as I call them, and controversies that have been around. We talked about one, the exhibition on Africa outside Impulse a few years back, and the Resource article. Resource was also known for, there are more articles that were more controversial from Resource. So one such topic was the contentious article on China that sparked heated discussions and protests. We were discussion in a group of people involving the Dean of Research. Of course, you were there, Social Safety Manager. We had the Chinese PhD representatives and the members of DARE. Yeah. And we had a healthy, heated but healthy discussion, which led to some actions. But of course, it's very difficult to dampen pain, especially when people are hurt, and there were demands to kind of bring the article down online and stuff, and still from the Chinese community, I feel a sense of that they still don't feel that they achieved everything what they wanted to dampen the pain. How did the university navigate this situation? Yeah, it was indeed a complex situation. So basically recalling what happened then, so I have to really dive also into my memory. The article. So let me start with maybe some preconditions. So Resource is not a university newspaper. It's an independent newspaper who writes on the university, and they have a journalistic code which basically said, and we find it very important, they are independent. They can write what they want. And normally, if it's extremely sensitive, they do a check, usually with the people from communication of the universities, and not just to say you can't write that, but basically say, okay, are you sure you want to write that? So that check didn't go well. So I didn't saw the article before. And once I came to know it when it was printed in Resource, and I think also it helped very much that I've worked a lot in China, so I know a little bit the Chinese community. And basically when I read it, I find two things. One is that it was not a good article just by journalistic standards. There were different topics going through each other, and by that giving strange kind of combinations where might be that the people who wrote it did not really want to make that kind of suggestions of combining, PhD results with a certain kind of PhD constituencies, communities, or nationalities. Mm-hmm. And the second, what I immediately noticed, this you can feel extremely offended by it as a Chinese community. So basically, what I did directly. We can. So I still think that it was the right thing from the executive board not to interfere in the Resource journalism. I think that's their responsibility. I think it's very important. I felt it also very important to make very clear that this is a Resource article and it's not the point of view of the executive board. Mm-hmm. And it was a unique occasion. I have never done it before, and I have never done it afterwards up till now. So I wrote on behalf of the executive board a piece on the intranet of the university, basically to convey the message to all Wageningen constituencies, including the Chinese community in Wageningen, but also the wider community, the Dutch and the other nationalities. Position was, and also how we looked at that article, and that was pretty sharp. So, and I of course also hoped. So with that, we made a position quite clear that this is not the kind of journalism and the contents of the message where we agree upon, but also saying that we won't interfere in the journalistic independence of Resource. Yeah. And following from that, we indeed entered into a discussion because, I still can understand that the Chinese, especially PhD community, felt extremely offended by that. I was very gladful that DARE stepped in to take. Mediating role is not the right word, but at least to organize the conversation. I think. Yeah,
we had our own way of. We had our own role, of course, and lies in our origins. How we are even more active in pursuing it with having conversations with different parties, try to bring everyone on the table, and we learned also along the way because I remember I wanted to have a discussion directly, and we discussed it also on the table like that day when we had all the parties together, that we need to have a discussion about this topic about China, because it's not only was Wageningen at that moment, but you there were reservations with collaboration with China across the Netherlands, be it big companies like ASML or Delft University of Technology. And it's everywhere, and you see multiple articles online about this. Yep. So it goes deeper than that, and I still hope that at some point we do have this discussion, and then this is going towards a different topic. But I was personally happy with the reaction of your article, like on internet, and then it was later spread also via other mediums to students and.
I saw that.
So that was a really good action, and with DARE, we had conversations with Resource to kind of again make themselves realize the harm that such article can cause. And again, it's subconscious discrimination and bias that has a lot to do with it. So you can attack people, but with that, they will always go on the defense. Rather, you try to just let them know all the facts and figures and kind of show them ways of how they can improve so that they don't cause that pain. So in that way, we were happy that Resource was followed a training on cultural awareness, because they are also like a predominantly white like organization, not part of the university, independent, but still they recognize that they lack diversity. And I also heard the person who usually writes articles on this subject was on leave at the moment, and someone else had to take this up. So there could have been several things that could have gone wrong, and they recognize that, and they want to improve on it. So I'm happy that they accepted to do this training. And I hope they have a guest. One of our DARE members is also a guest editor in Resource. Joshua Wambugu from Kenya.
So I think that although it was a quite intensive case, and I thought also that the emotions were quite sincere also, and sometimes also both at the side of the Chinese communities, of course, but also at a certain moment also at the Resource journalist. I think in the end it really helped us further, and I think that is the best we can get out of these kind of incidents. That in the end, so when it is a little bit cooled down, you can also sit a little bit more relaxed backward and say, okay, what can we learn from this episode? And I think indeed I think Resource really noticed that something went not completely right, and I'm very happy that they took up the initiative to widen their
especially
their
the topic about sandwich PhDs, because it's a problem not only for Chinese but for many different communities. We heard like people coming also from South American countries and different continents who have this issue, and I'm happy that the Dean of Research wanted to look into it, the payments and the conditions of sandwich PhDs. And I hope that there's some good progress in it. Another issue that was brought to light during the DARE project is the lack of diversity among corporate staff at WER. Can you share your thoughts on this and how the university is addressing it?
I think that is a very fair point. I think it's part of a wider movement where we see a diversification of the wider constituency at Wageningen. I think students it's fine. PhD students is more than fine. We are quite diverse. At the level of the assistant professors also, but the more we move upwards, the less diverse it becomes. And we know that also, and we act on that. I think the issue of the really corporate staff and the supporting staff, it's a little bit even exaggerated there. So the lack of diversity. I think we never made a very clear policy on that. Partly it's also a little bit complicated. So it's a little bit more easy to have, say, international staff in science, in education, etc. In some of the supporting staffs, think about HR, where you have to know all the Dutch rules and regulations. Partly also communication, maybe that's less, but especially also in the juridical department. So partly it's also based on the exact task, what you do. But partly is also, I fully admit that it's a lack of consciousness of the university. So I think it really helps if we widen that. And I'm a strong believer, you know that indeed diversification helps to increase really the level and basically the excellence of our work. So I really am a strong believer that diverse team perform better than say mono-national or non-diverse teams.
Yeah, you have different perspectives coming.
You have different perspectives. You have also people who are more sensitive of a certain kind of background. It can be culture, but can also be gender. Can be, and basically people ask different type of questions to each other. They less take things for granted, and usually that helps a lot in making people more aware. Well, is this really logical that we do that? We do that already for 20 years, but no one ever asked that question. And then suddenly a diverse people from a very different perspective comes in and asks that typical question. Can still be that it is still the best what we do for 20 years.
And when they ask that question, like sometimes they are scared that am I doing the right thing, especially if you are only colored person in a room, it can be quite daunting. It's a challenging task to be.
It's really
the only black, brown, like whatever shade of color you are. But yeah, the thing is, and that you see in the numbers as well. Because if I look at the data from my colleagues at HR, officially I was under corporate HR. 70% of the internationals, they are leaving within 1 to 4 years of joining were. And this is data from last year. And this is quite like, I would want to know why this is happening, and I hope some of my colleagues pick it up. But I already have kind of a feeling why it might be happening. And this is also excluding PhD and postdoc positions. So this is really... and the Dutch numbers are less than half of it.
Yeah.
Do you have something to add or say on this?
No, I think that so probably there are different, because it's one factor which plays a role. So there might be different factors. So there might be people who just want to have a working experience and want to go back to where they originally come from. But of course, there's also an element of not feeling sufficiently. Maybe, and now I use the bracket, so to feel at home at the university and feel integrated enough,
included,
indeed, it's an inclusive inclusion process which should take place, and that asks a lot, especially also from the Dutch people. And you see it you see it also at the science level, so where people are just scientists, also there. If people leave voluntarily by themselves, that's of course no problem. And of course it's also healthy for an organization to have a regular through flow and the throughput of new staff coming in and old staff moving out.
But isn't this incredibly high, these numbers for a university?
I didn't know those numbers.
Okay.
That's very high. So I have we have no goal for these numbers. But of course, if they are too high, then something is at stake. If they are too low, then also something is at stake. Because if people stay too long, whether they are Dutch or foreign so if they stay too long and too massive amount of people, then it's also not healthy. So you want to have a balance in that. But if this put the numbers before me, so I think that is not a good sign.
And I really hope that it is looked into it in form of whatever form, like exit interviews or any other method that they want to kind of find out why this is happening. That would give a clear picture, because that also you are a big believer in the international classroom, just having a diverse group of people together with the perspectives, and Wageningen prouds itself on being international. And sustainability is of course a big part in it. And so it would be nice to know why this is happening and try to tackle those.
I think one of the factors which plays a role is that, of course, and that is now slowly starting to change, hopefully, is that really on the top management level, we are quite Dutch. So we just hired the first international managing director at Plant Sciences, Richard Harrison, and we are extremely pleased with that. And that's a major step. And so I think when we have taken that bridge, so to say, when the first comes, then that might follow with others. And so there was a kind of hesitance, I think, from the top of the university already for quite some time, and also Wageningen Research, to take that first step. I'm really
happy with that.
I'm also extremely happy. And you see, and people always wondered, and then we have to all talk English, and does it fit? And can we send someone to the ministry which has not a Dutch background? It just works. It requires some adaptation, but it just works. And a lot of people, also at the ministry, who always speak Dutch, they say it's refreshing. We hear things how they do it in the UK. He's coming from the UK in a very different way. And it also helps us to open up our mind. So we have done that for 20 years. So run the top sectors, set out money in a competitive calls in a certain way. It helps, and I think that's a strong point of diversity.
And this is a good example, and I hope it trickles down to other research groups as well.
Although, of course, but maybe we come on that later. Dutch politics doesn't help at the moment.
That's certainly our next segment, so we move to that. Okay, so this was a nice bridge to the impact of political climate on education and research in the Netherlands. So let's talk about it, particularly regarding government pressure to reduce international student numbers. How has this affected Wageningen University and research? And what are your thoughts on the future of Dutch education in light of these policies?
Yeah. Yeah, so to be clear, so at the moment it has not affected us at all. So basically it's too fresh. So basically I think the big discussion started about a year ago. So I think it was spring 2023 when a number of political parties started to put international students in the migration debate. And I think that really, I think it's completely wrong to do that, but okay, that happened. And that really sparked a lot of discussion, and they gained a lot of momentum. And also during the elections in autumn, it was a main topic. But it is rather recent, so it has not really affected up till now. So the possibilities of international students to study at Wageningen University or any other Dutch university. But of course, yeah, it is coming. We see it coming. Yeah, I think I made it very clear at various moments that I think it's really the wrong way to move to. I think really that international students are major assets, both to the educational and research system, as well as to the wider Dutch society. You see also there's a big movement also in the immigration debate that they say, okay, that might be, might be a necessity to limit a little bit the immigration, but certainly not the immigration for new talents. So we won't have to move to a knowledge economy. We are moving out of really production, primary production, and move to a knowledge economy.
And to add to this, it's also quite counterintuitive because we were talking before the show and I watched this show Zondag met Lubak. It's now the Lubak show 5 days a week on, I think it's the government channel. There was a episode on immigration, and he dived deep into who are the people who are exactly coming to the Netherlands. And there were people who are like Dutch people coming back, a big portion. They are migrant laborers who are picking the tomatoes in the fields, for example. Yeah, just people doing odd jobs. And the thing is, it's counterintuitive in a way is that if you want to limit these numbers and going a bit off topic because university students often end up being like knowledge migrants, but still this would have a devastating impact on the Dutch economy. Yeah, the point that you say that if what diversity brings in, and and this is about blaming things on people for policies that could have been prepared in a better way, be it like the housing crisis. So this is all my personal opinion, of course, and I often have a feeling that the problem is always shifted towards a small portion of internationals or immigrants, while it's way bigger, and there can be multiple ways of looking at it. Yeah,
no, definitely. So in Wageningen we don't have much of a housing problem, but of course I discussed a lot with my colleagues in Utrecht where they have a major housing problem. But basically there they say, of course we have a housing problem, but the housing problem was already there way before international students came in, and it will be way there still when international students will not come in anymore. So it's not linked to migration. It's a general phenomenon on indeed how the housing progress was being planned and progressed. It had all kind of other. It's nice to live, of course, in Utrecht, in the center of the Netherlands. So it had all kind of other dimensions to it, and in that sense, indeed, it's quite limited and only focusing on one factor if they link those two together.
And I think media has a big role to play in this. How they project this also on. Or how people perceive it, where they get the information from, because there are a lot of myths, and if you look at the real numbers, they're often so counterintuitive, so different than the facts, that people think if an international immigrant is coming from somewhere, either they are taking the boat through the sea, and that number is like not even 10% of people who are arriving to the Netherlands. And you have myths, it just goes on, like there's so many myths surrounding international students, for example, like out of, it's a data from a few years back, but out of the 120,000 international students that came to Netherlands a few years back, 90,000 plus from that were from Europe itself, from the European Union. And only 20,000 from Asia, that's the second biggest. And then you have the rest like Australia, North America and stuff. So for also international students, people directly have in mind like countries far away, like India, China, they are flooding our universities, but that's far from the truth, and it trickles to another discussion about collaboration in the European Union, because there are certain things in place, if I look at it like my way, that allows these students to freely move from country to country, and it is a burden on the taxpayer in the Netherlands, but this is the way to exist in the European Union, I believe. And
I think the misinterpretation is also very much that this economic argument on taxpayers' money, that doesn't count for all the people coming from outside EU to the Netherlands. Basically, they're really adding to with taxes being paid and all kind of living costs they made and etc. They add to our gross national product.
Almost 100,000 per international student, like who's paying the full tuition fee. That is almost a few times more than if a Dutch student pays like 3,000 to 4,000. I think it's almost 20,000 for international student, accounting for inflation, like at this, this moment.
And what really makes me a little bit, not angry, but really where I think, the debate is completely wrong, is that they completely frame this whole debate into a very narrow national discussion within the borders of the Netherlands. So if it's good for the Netherlands, then we can allow those migrants. And I think they don't see, and it's especially I think that particularly counts for Wageningen and Wageningen international students, is that they're coming here and also they're leaving the Netherlands. If they leave, they are not outside of the Netherlands in terms of connectedness, in terms of new projects being made, etc. So we have a wide 20,000 volume of alumni all over the world. And they are particularly important, not just for us to do new projects, to do education, etc., but also for the companies of the Netherlands to make new business, etc. And that is completely left out of the discussion. And I find that a very narrowness in the discussion to do it.
It is. I think you've made your point very clear, and we are on the same page on this. But because of time considerations, let's move to the next segment. Let's come back to Wageningen. So we discussed enough of politics, what's happening here in terms of institutional challenges and some reflections. So one thing that we worked on the DARE project in the last year was trying study association, student association, to change its name. It's called Heren 17, and there's a big history into it. They were the 17 board of directors of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, and their name derives from there, although they do disagree on that because it's such a, but it's a name that it doesn't fit in today's day and age, and that's why some members of DARE decided to take this up with them, and we were happy with the discussions that followed, which led to a questionnaire being sent around to current members of that association, who decided, unfortunately for DARE and for some people, to keep the name as it is because of several reasons. I'm curious about your thoughts about like these discussions popping up, and I think it will become more and more like as we go ahead into in time. And maybe you can also talk a little bit about the university's effort of appointing a postdoc researcher, Larissa, who is looking into Ver's colonial past.
No, thanks for that question, Amit. So I think you are completely right. I think we are just at the beginning of a discussion on the colonial past and how you still see that in a number of symbolic tokens or very also statues and paintings, etc. And I think that is a healthy discussion which takes place. And I think the Heren 17 discussion was an element of that. And I think it's good that these discussions takes place. It helps to raise consciousness. And although the decision might not be seen in favor of DARE, I think the fact that it was raised as an issue, it was discussed, it was debated, that helps, I think. And there will be a number of these discussions in the coming period. So we see now also I see a nice picture in the resource also of an excursion along the colonial heritage of Wageningen University. And also in that matter, I decided, I think it was now about 2.5 years ago, because I saw indeed this discussion coming. I think we have to be more aware of where we as a university and research center, where we come from. What is our own history in relation to the colonial period? So indeed, Larissa, who's a PhD student at Professor Frankema's Rural and Environmental History Group. So she is really diving into, okay, what did the university and the predecessors of the university did in the past? How they were they linked to the colonial regime? And there can be different elements into that. And I gave them completely the free hands.
Are there some results you would like to share with our listeners already?
That is not so easy because, of course, they brief me now and then, but especially on the progress. And so basically what they said. So of course I'm worried. Are there really major wrongdoings? So it basically say, well, it's not. There's nothing really complete. So we're not linked up to slavery. We're not linked up to major misbehavings, colonial agricultural. She's especially focused on Suriname and Indonesia, of course. But of course, it's as also with discrimination in the Netherlands, it's the big things. Yeah, that's easy to see. But what is under it? So what are the unconscious tendencies? So I expect that she will come up with that also, and she also come up with an interpretation on how you should look at it. And the interesting thing, I think, what we managed to put up front, because we were in the Netherlands the first university to enter in such a research. Now you see it also happening at other universities, and she's really setting up a European-wide network of similar type of research of other universities. Okay, what have they done? And I think that really, and I think that's what Wageningen should do, help up a wider movement of, okay, dive into your history, look what's happening, and raise consciousness on that.
And I'm really happy some professors, my previous thesis supervisor, Shizu Sato, she's from Japan, and now at the Cultural Geography Group works on the topics of intersectionality. That is becoming, there's a European-wide project going on it called Inspire. I was also one of the members they interviewed on it as well. And there are professors like Birgit Bogart, the National Teacher of the Year, and she recently had a TED Talk on decolonizing education in general, has a course on African philosophy. And I can name many professors who are working on and teachers who are working on the topics and looking critically at their curriculum and seeing what can change and how we can use the international classroom, the students, to get like different kind of inputs. So I led a session on education, racism in education, and there was a chemistry teacher who was intrigued. I had a quiz there, and he got all the answers right. I was surprised by that, but also really happy that he did about racism and discrimination in general. And he was already busy with ways, because a few years back, decades back, you would not imagine that there's another way of teaching chemistry than just the Western concepts. But there can be. And he went back with that he'll ask his international students to find out different theories, methods. I'm not a chemistry student, so I have no idea how it will look like. But just as you mentioned, to get the discussion started is already a big thing, and who knows what kind of results they might bring.
And I think it also should not be at the board of the university to decide which direction should go. I think we should facilitate that, and I think that's what we try to do.
Thanks. That kind of brings me to the last segment on which in this segment, I have a few questions for you from some stakeholders of DARE along the way. Also, some members who couldn't be there in person, of course, today. So I'll ask it on behalf of them. The first one is the journey towards installing DARE experienced some sense of distrust along the way. How is the executive board consistently building and shaping trustworthy processes in addressing diversity and racism issues?
Okay, well, I cannot really. Well, probably we should have asked for the explanation of the person.
Yeah.
So basically, I think at the executive board there's no distrust. So basically, I think what we consider very important from the executive board is that we really institutionalize the DARE process into the regular. So I think DARE started a little bit outside of the regular structures, and I think that happens with all new developments. And of course, what we think is DARE should be part within the institutional structures, in the regular HR processes, in the regular way of communicating to the outside world, in the regular science and education process, etc. So I think that is the line what we try to achieve as an executive board. So I think there's at least from my part of view, and I also don't recognize that there's a distrust towards DARE. I think it was in the beginning, it was a new process, so there might be with some persons an attitude of, okay, what is this? And of course, we also discussed that. So is there really now something like racism here or discrimination? And what is it then? And I think DARE made it very clear that it is, and it is necessary to dive into that and to make that a part of the regular processes.
Okay, let's leave it to that. And I didn't say it before, but let's see it as a rapid fire round. So keep it to 1 or 2 sentences.
Oh, right. Okay.
Difficult, I know. I'll try to also choose the questions accordingly. I have a list, but I'll try to see how far we come. For students and staff to be aware of D&I and act accordingly, it is important that VER itself sets the right examples. How does VER do that, like setting the right example? Do you have 1 or 2 cases that you can?
So I think what you just discussed there. So starting an investigation into our history and be very open and transparent on that. So I think that's setting the right example. I think taking the forefront in the discussion, which we do together with Utrecht on the internationalization of students and trying to influence the Dutch government policy on that. I think there we really step up as an international university on that.
Okay, thanks. Last question. I'll keep it short. Have you read the book The Safer Vinkjes by Joris Lauwendijk?
No, I haven't read that.
Okay, then I'll say...
I know the message.
Yeah. Maybe if I mention them, you can count how many of them you have. You have all 7. Okay.
I think I have all 7.
Yeah, so for our listeners, like being a man, white, hetero, a diploma from the university diploma, high-level education, parent, and at least one of them born and brought up in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So
I touch all 7 vinkjes, so to say. Okay. So, and I think, I can't change that. So the best thing I can do, and I think that is the message also of Joris Lauwendijk, is to make sure that you are aware of that, and to make sure that your social environment is not consisting of 7 vinkjes people. So only, I think that is the best. And that's also what I try to do in our organization.
Thanks, Arthur. That brings us to the end of the conversation. Arthur, I want to thank you for joining us today and for your support of the DARE project over the past 3 years. I wish you all the best in your journey ahead. It has been a pleasure working with you. In the time, as I mentioned, I started as a student, and I have a lot of respect for you, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope the same for you as well.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it a lot. I've seen you growing as a student when you came in, and also when you sat on the student council, and how you became very active and motivated in the DARE project. And I really appreciate what you're doing for the university. And it's also on a personal level, I like you very much. So it's always very nice to do something with you and work with you.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Although the DARE project may be coming to a close, the fight against racism and discrimination will continue with the formation of a central D&I coordinating team under the Gender Plus project. We encourage everyone to get involved and stay engaged in this important work. Until next time, take care and be daring.